Hello and welcome to another Tim Talk podcast by Celtic Down Under. I'm your host, Jarrod, and joining me tonight is Russell Boyce, who is one of the regular contributors on the Celtic State of Mind podcast. How you going, Russell?
Very good, mate. Delighted to be here, Jarrod. I've been listening to your dulcet tones for a long time, my friend, so it was an honour when I was asked on, mate. So looking forward to it.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, it's the same. I listen to you guys all the time as well. So we're just talking off air. It's like we feel like we've known each other for years, and this is the first time we're actually talking. So great fun.
Totally weird, isn't it? Because, genuinely, before you were Celtic Down Under, it was Oz Celts, and I genuinely did listen every single week. So, it's a bit weird that you listen to Axom, I've listened to your pod, and now we're meeting. So, all good, mate. Love it.
It's good fun. Love it. It's, the things that happen in Celtic, we all love the team, and that's the common theme here. So, yeah, do you want to just tell the listeners a bit about yourself and how you became a Celtic fan?
Yeah, first and foremost, obviously right now, doing a lot of work, privileged to be, part of the Celtic State of Mind team right now, which is, just your favourite hobby in the world, getting to talk about Celtic, very much like yourself, Jarrod. It's, you're getting to do it to a lot of viewers, you're meeting new people all the time. In terms of starting to support Celtic, it's a typical tale. It's quite poignant. It's Father's Day. My dad died 12 years ago, sadly. But of course, that's how I started supporting Celtic. It's quite a funny story to it. So when he introduced me to football and he sort of, what it's like they ingrained Celtic on you. Do you know what I mean? Like, which is quite right. That's all good. But we were hopeless at the time, hopeless. And it was like, Dad, like my class at school's almost all Rangers fans, the boys. It was mainly boys that liked football back in the 90s. And all of them are Rangers supporters apart from like me. And they're slagging me off week on week. They're in the middle of 9 in a row. They've got Gaza and stuff. And, we're losing to Wraith Rovers in Coca-Cola Cup finals. And I'm like, do you know what? This isn't really working out. And my next door neighbour, who was the same age as me, same primary school class, he was diehard Rangers. So I'm beginning to go, do you know what? This isn't really, what's going on here? I don't even have a strip, to warrant all this depression that I'm going through, being this supporter of this new team that I'm to follow, with my life and soul. So what I did, Jarrod, right, is I got one of my next door neighbour's older Rangers tops, right? This is quite mad for an 8-year-old boy's mindset. And I stuck it on and I wore it into my house. And obviously, Dad, Celtic diehard's like, what are you wearing? I went, well, I'm just going to support Rangers, you know, all that happens is Celtic lose all the time and you don't even have the decency to get me a strip. I was never going to be a Rangers fan, for the record, but I knew what I was doing. Brilliant. Saturday, that weekend, we go straight into town, and I promise this is the truth. At 8 years old, as soon as we walked up to JJB Sports, I remember exactly where it was located in the town centre. I knew what we were going in for. I got the full strip, socks, the lot, and it was obviously, it was checkmate, wasn't it? He could not bear the thought of me going to the dark side. So,
well played.
For an 8-year-old, that's quite decent manipulation tactics. It's dark.
That's devious, but I love it. Oh, that's the best, yeah.
But yeah, it stems from there, though, then, doesn't it? Because it's as the song says, if you know your history. And for me, there's no better way of learning the history than listening to, whether it be a grandparent, an older relative, or an older friend or whatever, and they teach you the history. And they teach you about what it is to be a Celtic supporter and why you're a Celtic supporter and what the cause is and who these icons are and legends of it. And before you know it, you fell in love. And it was all VHS, obviously, in the 90s. And Dad would buy Celtic videos and stuff of the Lisbon Lions and things like that. And just once you get that into your soul, it ain't going anywhere, Jarrod. We can moan about the most recent season and stuff, but at the end of the day, the support for the club remains the same. And I've been lucky enough to be a Celtic fan since I was about 6 years old,
Yeah, it's you're spot on there. It's funny how it grows on you over the years, because it's like you're told, this is your team, this is what you should be going for, but then it just festers away and you're like, that's my team, okay. And then suddenly it's like there's just that one thing that just triggers you, and then it's like, oh, this has happened in the past and this player and that. And for me, it was different in the 90s because being on the other side of the world, we were getting VHS tapes sent over. So once a month we could get together at the CSC and watch games. So we were watching games that were 3-4 weeks old, not knowing results, to then sit there and watch these games and be like, oh, okay, when are we going to find out the next batch? Oh, in a month's time. And
that's insane, Jarrod.
So that's how it was for us. And then you had British Football Week. The magazine newspaper came out.
Yeah.
So that was the next step on how I get the results, because I subscribed to that. I'd go to my local newsagent every week, pick it up. But it was 2 weeks old by the time it got here. So it was done over there. Then it was shipped. Then I got here. So I'm looking at it going, oh, how'd we go in the derby? And I'd have a look and go, oh, okay, cool. We had a draw.
And without asking too much, Jarrod, what sort of era was that? I don't want to, challenge on your age or anything like that, but what sort of era are we talking?
That's the 90s.
90s, yeah.
So I was born 82. So 2000 I was 18, but yeah, a bit tall and everything. So I was able to get into the CSC underage, have a couple of soft drinks, and and get out and just watch the games and everything. And the one time I got busted wag in school was when Viduka signed and then he pissed off back to Melbourne.
That's right. And
then he got announced. Yeah, from Marco to Mark. Yeah. But he got, as he was standing at the Celtic Club here, which is where my CSC was at the time, is holding up the Celtic shirt. And the Channel 7 News was there that day filming it. And my mum goes, how was school? And I'm like, yeah, it was good, blah, blah, blah. I did a bit of PE, whatever. And she goes, yeah, but what are you doing there on TV? Because I was 3 people behind on TV in my school uniform and everything. So
that's superb.
That's about as close as it got to actually being in the moment as a Celtic fan in the 90s in Australia.
But, mate, the dedication that you've shown to be watching, VHS 2 to 3 weeks later, to me, it's not always about being a season ticket holder. That doesn't define anything. It's all about supporting Celtic in any way you can. And that, I mean, the lengths you were going to there that you're talking about, reading, magazines 2 weeks, after the date basically of the matches and things like that, shows proper dedication, mate. So it was obviously as ingrained in you as it was anyone else.
Yeah, I didn't want to wait a month to find out the next batch of VHS tapes, because they had a loaded up team with, like, as you mentioned, with Gazza and all these guys. And I'm like, I don't want to sit there with and have to wait a month to find out what's happened.
No,
so it was like, get me pocket money or go work. First job I had at McDonald's, as you do as a teenage boy, earn a couple of dollars so I could go down and buy that. That was what that was for.
Brilliant, man.
Crazy when you look back at it now going, gee, that was like over 20 years ago. And it's so different with Celtic TV and streaming and all that sort of stuff. So,
of course,
come a long way. But anyway, so we'll jump on to last season. I've heard you and Axom summing it up. We'll just smash through this question nice and quick, because who wants to dwell on the past? What was your review of last season? Who you think were our top performers and who underperformed?
I think the season never got started, Jarrod, if I'm totally honest. I think it was from Bull and Goaliegate. From then on, it was just car crash after car crash. I think, the poignant moment for me when I realised things could get really messy here was the first derby, when we didn't get a shot on goal at Celtic Park against Rangers. They won 2-0, but it was a scoosh. It was an absolute walk in the park that day. Not one shot on target. I don't know if that was the first time ever that had happened at Celtic Park when we were the home side, but it must be one of the only times ever at very least. And that's when I think Stephen Welsh made his debut that day, and you just thought, we're not organised here. Things aren't right. I think as well with the season, things got from bad to worse. I did feel that we hung on to the coaching team or certainly the head coach, longer than what was necessary. I thought he was blindly backed as opposed to backed with, because remember there was this review. Remember things got messy when the review was he's under review. So we all thought, right, well, look at the results now. This review can only end in disaster for Lennon. He's clearly going to get his jotters in January. And yet, my memory tells me it was the end of February.
Yeah.
Beginning of March before they actually pulled the trigger. it just got farcical Dubai, things like that. It's going to be a season that gets remembered in the history books for a lot of wrong reasons, but it was a spectacular collapse at the end of what was, a real golden time for Celtic fans, and which defines right now as well, Jarrod. We're talking about how long we've supported Celtic. There's a generation that only knew success because we had such sustained success for so long, and for it to fall off the cliff in the manner it did it's one that's going to live long in the memory. In terms of performances, try to look on the plus sides. I thought David Turnbull was brought into the team too late, albeit the fact he was brought in was a good thing. I thought Turnbull showed to me he's Celtic class. He's someone you build your team around going forward. He gets it. He was brave on the ball in a team that looked to me that they were hiding. In terms of underperformance, I think we only need to look at the Scotland-England game. I don't know if you watched it on Friday.
Yeah.
Callum McGregor was immense and looked like Callum McGregor under Brendan Rodgers. Callum McGregor was a real... Say that again?
So I can tell you my thoughts on that in a minute.
Yeah, please do. I mean, I thought he had a great game, and he was. It was in stark contrast to the displays that we've seen in the previous season just finished. In terms of other underperformers, it's a funny one because you can only look at the squad as a whole and feel that a lot of them did underperform, and then you flip it and you go, a lot of them weren't really given that much of a chance. The jury's still probably out on some, believe it or not, even though they've been at the club a year. I mean, I don't know. Did Griffiths underperform? I'm still not quite sure. He never seemed to get integrated back in the squad properly. Yet he seemed to start with a bang and then was sort of out in the cold by the end of the season. Barkas only probably started, 13, 14 games out of a 50-plus match season. It's hard to say with some. I just think the biggest underperformer was Neil Lennon.
Absolutely. Well, funny you say Barkas, because one of the guys on our pod calls Barkas cabbage hands because I've never seen him actually save a shot. So, look, with Ange coming in, you don't know, because apparently Barkas, his biggest strength is he's a good sweeper keeper with the ball at his feet. And Ange likes to play that way. So that could actually work. But until I've actually seen him actually save a shot, the jury's out on Barkas. So, yeah, you're spot on with some guys not knowing. But what you're saying about McGregor in the Scotland-England game, I reckon the handful of games he played the best for us this season, and I love Bruni. The first ever Celtic player whose name and number I got on the back of any shirt was Bruni a few years back.
Yep.
Yeah, that green and green hoop one that we had in with the goal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was nice. Yeah.
So it was that shirt. But when Bruni went out and Sorrow was in alongside Kelmack, I think McGregor actually played at that standard that you're talking about. Reason being, he wasn't having to do Bruni's running for him as well as doing his own. And when you see McGregor in that game against England, he had other guys in the midfield that were doing their own running, playing their position, knowing when to hold, knowing when to press up, that he could just focus on his own game. And it's going to sound weird, but I actually don't think Kelmack should get the captaincy. I don't want it to weigh on him in the same way that my all-time favourite Celtic player is Paul McStay. But I think when he had the captaincy, it was too much on him back then. And the same thing is I can see if Kelmack gets the captaincy and he's supposed to be the leader and all this, I would rather him be like the vice captain, but to be the actual captain and to be in the midfield and have the same situation this season, I'm not with that. Like with the current squad when he's fit, put the band on Julian, in my opinion. That's what I'm leaning towards.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Julian's, to me, the natural choice. I've said that on Twitter already. I think there was a vote about the two. And for me, I think Julian is a more natural leader who I actually think will improve because he gets captaincy. Whereas I think right now McGregor's going to have a season of resurrection and let him be free to embrace that back to form season as opposed to, you've had a low, maybe 18 months, not at the races as much as what, it's certainly in contrast to what he was in the Rodgers era. And why weigh him with a further, sort of burden? I think I'm in complete agreement. I wouldn't give it to Callum McGregor at all. The other flip side is, of course, unless Postecoglou is going to bring someone in who he trusts and has a lieutenant on the pitch he wants to make captain, fair enough, I don't mind that. But yeah, I'm in total agreement. I think Callum McGregor needs to just go back to being Callum McGregor, not with a label on top of it, because what I've seen against England gave me really encouraging signs that he's not lost it in any way, shape, or form. The Brown conundrum that you're discussing as well isn't going to be there. He played with like-minded players on Friday. Let's hope he's playing with more like-minded players in the Celtic shirt next season as well, Jarrod.
We used to joke around that the best midfield that we had was when you had Christie actually in an 8 instead of as a 10 alongside McGregor with Rogic in front under under Rodgers. We thought, like, on the old Oz Celts and on that was, we actually thought that was probably our best midfield.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a lot of legs there. But the saying with McGregor, I think the saying "heavy is the head that wears the crown" sums him up when he's got the captain's armband on. Like that's the ultimate summary of him. Like, if he's got to be the captain and do his job and have Scott Brown alongside him run out of legs, it's just too much for him. So now, as you said, Bruni's no longer there. But I'd still put the captaincy on Julian when he's back. But you mentioned about if Ange brings in a captain, there's a guy I've been wanting, and I've been harping on about it for years, about him coming to Celtic as a centre-back, Trent Sainsbury.
Okay.
Australian centre-back, ball playing one, best mates with Tom Rogic. Rogic was actually his best man at his wedding. They're like they played together for years. Sainsbury was a captain at PSV in Holland, played at Inter Milan in the past. He's over in China at the moment. You could pick him up pretty dirt cheap, I reckon.
Wow.
And I think he's like 30, 31, similar, a couple of years older than Rogic maybe, but that's someone I've wanted at Celtic going back 2 years. Like, I think he would be a good option at centre-back. And if my memory's right, he's actually a left-sided centre-back too.
Which we are crying out for, firstly. And do you think that's the type of player that will be on Postecoglou's radar?
Absolutely. Like, realistically, if you look at it, say if he has a budget of £15 million to spend, for instance, just plucking a random number because that seems reasonable.
I think that's about accurate.
Plus what he's got to spend for sales. If you manage to get 8 to 10 million for Aya, and you get 6 to 8 million for, say, Christie, if you're lucky, and if you get 15 million for Edouard, that'll push you up to around 40 million. Give or take. My maths isn't the greatest, right?
I get what you're saying.
But if you've got to try and sign 12 players, that money's not going to go very far. Yeah. So the thing with Ange is he's good at bringing through guys. So I actually think straight away, the 3 Irish boys we brought in at the same time, O'Connor, Connell and Afolabi, I'm a fan of all 3. I'm hoping that at the Wales camp, those guys prove themselves to Ange, or he looks and goes, oh, there's a player there. I could do that, because straight away, that means you only need 1 right back instead of 2 right backs. Then you've got, Connell to come in and take Bruni's spot. So you've got Sorrow and Connell as your defensive midfielders. Mm-hmm. And then you go and put Afolabi up front to take Klamala's spot, not Eddie's. Then you're still with that 40 million. Then you're still with that 40 million there. If you put Dembele in as well to back up Jamesy outright, then you've got to get a left midfielder, a striker. I think the centre mid positions are fine. And then you got to get a left back, probably two centre backs, 3 centre backs, maybe.
2, I would say 2 right now, definitely.
Yeah, and a right back. So that's 6 players. 40 million for 6 players. That'll go a long way.
Now the key question is, though, Jarrod. The key question is, sorry to cut in there, but the key question is, if Celtic generate the fees that you're discussing there, right? I've never known Celtic to reinvest 100% of funds received. That would be my worry. We're talking about a 40 million bank. In my experience, Celtic only spend 20 of that. You know, that would be my concern. I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying, but I think there could be lost revenue here, obviously, with the season just being without attendees at the actual matches, whatever the loss of revenue is there. The loss of revenue from the Champions League year on year, by the way, has got to take its toll eventually. It's nonsense. And I also think the concern will be, and this isn't disrespectful to Ange, I just feel that I think it's going to be a hard sell to get 52,000 season tickets sold again this year. I'm not convinced that it will happen. If it does happen, it will happen once the seasons began, as opposed to before the seasons began, like it normally does. I think it's a harder sell this year. I think there's a lot of disillusion between the Celtic board and the supporters right now, which I feel is going to then impact on the level or the volume, should I say, of season books sold before the actual season starts. He starts with a bang, yes, we can get to those levels again. If he doesn't, I'm not convinced we're going to be making the sort of money that we're accustomed to via tickets, and that again can then impact on what they then allocate for transfers. It's interesting what you said though about the youth players. From what I've read about Ange, he certainly seems to be someone who doesn't really care for reputation or experience. He's going to look with a clean slate, I'm guessing, at the pool of players, and if they're good enough, they're old enough. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I was saying. Like with 40 million, he's not going to spend that. But if it's players and you got 20 million, it's still achievable. Like, and what you mentioned earlier about would Ange look to bring those sort of guys in? Well, there's a Japanese winger who the day after Ange was announced at Celtic, I'm trying to, I can't remember what team it is, but he's in the Japanese Olympic team and a defensive midfielder. They signed with an agent over there and handed in transfer requests. These are guys that know Ange, and they, from what I've heard from Liam, one of our guys over in Japan, these guys would be awesome players at Celtic. So if he gets them, there's a striker at his current team, bring him in. You might get him for $3 million for each of these players. There's $9 million spent. You filled 3 spots, now you still got 3 more. You could pick up Sainsbury, as I was touching on before. You could pick him up for a couple of million, add him in the mix, and then he's got to go find. I've always said, let's get down the Balkans and find a couple of hard bastard centre backs from down there, guys who aren't afraid to leave the boot in. For that kind of money that we'll have to spend, that'll fill these holes in the squad.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what Celtic have lacked right now has been that defender who loves to defend. I know that sounds so simple, but like someone who just enjoys defending, I think Julian's very comfortable coming out. I do actually think he's braver than what he's given credit for. I think he's unfairly tagged with this made of chocolate stuff. I think that game against Livingston, that just seems to be a lazy label now put on him. I mean, he's never played on such a rubbish AstroTurf pitch in his life. He couldn't judge the flight of the ball, and he got made to look a bit foolish off Dykes, who trains on it and plays on it every week. And by the way, for the record, Lyndon Dykes made a few England players look daft on Friday, so it's no mean, it's not a one-trick pony that happening. But I would like to see a return of, if it's going to be Julian and Ayer leaves, the ball-playing defender being Julian, and then someone who just wants to put their head on it. And, set pieces, Jarrod. We conceded, I think I'm right in saying this, 18 goals in the SPFL last season from set pieces alone. That tells you there's not someone just going to ball. Just go and just clear your lines. Just someone who wants to attack the ball. It sounds, like I say, very simple. That's, dinosaur football, whatever. But we play in a league, right, that is not the EPL. It's not La Liga. It's not teams all just play. Sometimes teams want to ruffle your feathers. Sometimes you're against sides that want to put balls into the box at all costs. And you need to be able to deal with that if you want to win the title back.
Perfect summary for Scottish football is it's a combat. It's like a love child between Tony Pulis football and German football. That's the way I look at Scottish football. Teams will get the ball on the deck and play and are technical, but then you've got other teams that just want to lump it long and just have a Ryan Shawcross out there just putting studs into everyone's legs.
You're so right.
That's my summary there. But talking about those sort of centre-backs then, I've got 2 names for you. Probably haven't heard of them. Australian internationals because of Ange.
Yep.
Bailey Wright was at Preston North End, centre-back. I think he's down at Bristol City and he was their captain a couple of years ago.
Wow.
Decent, hard tackling centre-back, but he actually can play with the ball at his feet. The other one, when I was talking about Balkan players before, would be someone like Milos Deganek. He plays at Red Star Belgrade, centre-back.
Okay.
And he's a little bit insane. He's like the Aussie I wouldn't say Aussie Bobo Baldy because that would probably be Kevin Muscat for all the stuff he's done over the years. But no, it's a bit of a hard one. And yeah, he can play a bit too, and he's had plenty of Champions League experience. So they're guys who'd probably be affordable. Deganek got signed by Red Star. They bought him back for $2.5 million a couple of years ago. So there's a few names that people probably haven't heard of. And when I was talking about a left winger before, there's a guy who went over when he was a young kid, went to Lazio, played there for a few years in their youth, came back to Australia after bouncing around Europe, but he's at Perth Glory at the moment. He's coming back off an ACL, and he's been playing pretty well this year. It's Chris Economides. So left winger, I really rate him as well. So these are the sort of players that, with my background watching Celtic all the time in Scottish football, plus seeing Japan and seeing that, and the reason I know about Deganek and Red Star Belgrade is that's my in-laws club because my wife's family's Serb. So
wow,
I've got the eye there as well watching. I'm just like, there's a bunch of players there. So I reckon Ange will sign people and people will be like, who the F is this guy? Like, who's this? What's that player? And they'll come in and it'll be like, you may have one or two that flop. That happens every year. But
yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think he'll recruit pretty smartly because he's used to coaching in leagues where, okay, in Japan he had a really low, like the 12th highest wage budget in an 18-team comp. And in Australia he's on a salary cap where you've got to get 25 players under. You can have, I think it was 2 players as marquees outside of your salary cap, and then the other 23 all have to fit in under a $3 million salary cap. So he's used to finding players who are good and he's had a stretch of dollars. So it'll actually work for us, especially coming off the COVID lockdowns.
I find that really positive, Jarrod, right? But my concern is not actually Ange himself. My concern is when if Celtic let the reins go to a manager to be dictating to them what players they sign, we only need to look how many failed deals have happened over the last 2 to 3 years. Obviously, the John McGinn one's been exhausted, but it's such a pivotal one because that was a Brendan Rodgers target. And we ended up with Yusuf Malumbu at the end of that window, if you remember, at the last minute. Wes said the better.
Fazani or whatever it was as well. These are all Rodgers ones.
Shved always strikes me, He literally said, I'm sure he'll do a good job for the club, but we've got a million wingers here. What Rodgers was saying was, I don't know who this is. Now, then you look at Lennon's tenure, for all we've criticised, and I've been vocal in my criticism, of his management last season. But you've got to admit, the guy wanted Ivan Toney. He had Ivan Toney in Celtic Park's doors, literally in the building. How did that not get over the line? Now, my concern would be, which I love your positivity, and I don't want to sound like I'm being over negative, is, are they going to back Ange if Ange says, no, he's worth $3 million? Are they going to say, but is he? Why don't we try for maybe $2 million for him? And if that doesn't work, we've got this player on a list that's been, the same list they've been going to for the last decade. You know what I mean? We'll probably end up with Stephen Fletcher up front. You know what I mean?
God, no. Yeah, no, that list, my one concern, I know what you're saying. That list, please just tear it up, Celtic.
Someone tear it up.
Who put that list together? That's the real question. Who is responsible for that? Is it Nicky Hammond? Is it Peter Law? Is it Dudu Dahan or whatever it is? Whose list is that? Is it just every random name they've seen in the paper, they just write down on it? Oh, there's no one there even running the show. So that ties into my next question for you then. Do you think with Ange coming in, do we need a director of football? Because if the director of football, then they're going to set that structure and they'll have the recruitment team report to them, the medical, the youth academy. So we'll have a club structure. Do you think that's something Celtic needs to do?
I was all for the idea when we knew when Lennon was leaving. I think, as I say, end of February, March time, whatever. We've had 110 days to get a director of football in, Jarrod. They've still failed to do so. We've ended up going for the manager first, which wasn't even the first choice manager. I believe that the structure, how it was going to get, would have came with the director of football of his choosing. I think the fact we went out and cherry-picked the manager now means the director of football and the manager, whoever the director of football is not going to have a relationship with their manager now. So it doesn't seem to render as important to me now that we've went for manager first. If we went for director of football, then manager, you'd have thought, they've obviously clubbed heads together and now picked whoever the manager may have been. But the fact Celtic have now went above that and just pulled in their own manager. And then obviously the story's breaking last night, in the Sun of all places yet again, which really frustrates me, Jarrod. I mean, and the worst bit about it, right, is it's true because it's in the Sun and it's a Celtic story. That really does my head in. That is not the paper for us to be giving our leaks to, but yet they're consistently right with whatever leak it is that they come out with. So it looks like it's going to be Gordon Strachan. Whether they call it director of football or not, they're not going to have him alongside a director of football, so they can call him technical director or whatever they want. It is that role getting filled either way. And the thing is, if it is Gordon Strachan, I like Strachan football-wise. I think he's a very intelligent man. I'm not even thinking he's going to be bad at the job. It's how they come about these decisions that really frustrates me, because is this modernisation of Celtic Football Club, is this really outside-the-box thinking, or is it another... Well, we looked for Fergal Harkin, couldn't get him. We looked for, who was the other one? Eddie Howe's guy, Richard Hughes, couldn't get them. What about back to, as you said a minute ago, back to the old list? Who's a mate? We'll just get Gordon Strachan, and then you've got two Strachans at the club.
That's what my concern is.
Yep. And you look at how Gavin Strachan's there, it's my correct understanding, Neil Lennon wanted to bring, could be wrong here, but I think it was Johan Mjällby wanted to bring back.
Yep.
And that was usurped by Celtic, and basically Gavin Strachan was placed upon him. Now, I'm not going to sit and criticise Gavin Strachan for the job he did. I don't really know what he does. And I've never heard Neil Lennon say a bad word about him since he's left. He slagged the fans, but he's not slagged him. So maybe he does do a decent job there. But the fact of the matter doesn't change that Neil Lennon didn't have a say in that appointment. And I find that a bit concerning, that if that's Gavin Strachan, what was his purpose of being appointed if it wasn't like on the manager's say so? In fact, it wasn't actually the guy the manager sounded out to you. And you've got to believe that Ange Postecoglou, if he had any say in who his DOF's going to be, or any sort of thumbs up or thumbs down, you can't imagine Gordon Strachan was remotely on his radar.
Yeah, exactly. Look, someone I've been talking about for a while was, and I mentioned it when I was on Axon with Paul and Natasha and Lawrence a while back, was I actually wanted David Wagner as manager with David Webb as director of football. They've worked together at Huddersfield. They know, and that they both worked in the same sort of thing where director of football, they know, and manager, so they know the way it all works. That's what I wanted. But I always said if that wasn't going to happen and you had to have someone who knows the city and is Celtic-minded, I always thought Jackie McNamara would be perfect in that role, because he's worked in a front office down in the lower leagues in England. He's got the management experience. It's not going to be as taxing on him health-wise, you'd think, than being a manager. And he's a former club captain, so it's going to get people on side. So I thought he would be perfect in that role if we were going to go down that path. But, yeah, that's just my thoughts. It's not.
No, that's a fascinating idea. I'm not against that. It hadn't even occurred to me that sort of thought. But, yeah, you're absolutely right. He was chief executive at York. And he was at Dundee United. I know people look down on the fact he was getting a cut if they made profit on player sales and stuff like that, but it shows that he was also kind of half on the board as much as he was manager as well. He was obviously getting the same business decisions then as well, so he knows what cutthroat transfer dealings are all about. And when McNamara was in charge at Dundee United, and we know he had to say in these player sales, it was Robertson, Gold, Armstrong, Mackay-Steven, they all left for healthy profit from Dundee United. Chifty as well, yeah. And they all left that club for healthy profit, and he was very much front, left and centre in all those deals.
And then his next batch coming through after that was still decent, but he left before they had a chance to fully blossom and grow with the team. So, yeah, I actually think he'd be a great shout for it. But, yeah, if it's Gordon Strachan, then so be it. So I won't go to my next question about how you think recruitment's been over the last 18 months, because I think we've kind of just covered that already.
We kind of have. I mean, I just think, do you know something? See, on the face of it, if you look at last summer, Jarrod, we brought in the Republic of Ireland captain at centre-back when we needed this rugged centre-back I just described earlier on.
Yep.
To me, it ticked the boxes. We brought in an EPL striker who had a wonderful record in a comparable league, the Swiss league, with FC Basel or Bal. We brought in a guy who'd scored 12 to 14 goals for us the season before. We brought him back on loan. We spent $5 million on an international goalkeeper because Forster refused basically at the last second to come back. We compensated that with a guy with Champions League experience, international experience, and a huge transfer fee. You look at that nucleus of signings and you go, do you know what? It's not been a bad window. It's who we've missed out on, the likes of Tony, that's going to come back and bite Celtic. But over the last 12 to 18 months, we've discussed this a wee bit on our pod. I think Celtic have maybe overthought it. I think if you look at what Rangers' recruitment strategy has been, it's more basic. We seem to be signing players, for me, Jarrod, right, who sign, and we convince them to sign on the basis of, do well here, you'll get a big move. Whereas Rangers sign players and go, you're about to play for the biggest club you'll ever play for in your career. And that's their buy-in. Our buy-in for players is, we'll sell you on in 2 years, you'll be a star. And I think we need to move away from that. I want hungrier players. You know, I think it's time we start getting guys that come to Celtic and go, this is it. Not one eye on the exit door because there's going to be a big club coming calling. I think that's really important that we change that psyche. And I think one-offs, like a Moussa Dembele, and you say, look, Moussa, please come here for a couple of years, smash it, and you'll move on. One or two's okay. But I think we got to a stage when the majority of the squad, you've even got Ryan Christie now playing with one eye in the exit door, for God's sake, you know. And I think that festered in the squad, that everyone was playing for this bigger Richie's move, whereas you only need to look across the city. Someone who's, let's be honest, he's not great, Scott Arfield, but he plays the game of his life against us every time. And you go, he is playing it, he's living his dream right there. We don't have enough players living their dream at Celtic.
Yeah, because he knows that's as you said, that's the biggest club he's going to play for. And yeah, we've got players there, like, case in point, Anthony Ralston. Once he leaves us, he's never going to be at a comparable level club.
Yep.
And it's just things like that. It makes no sense. Like Scott Bain, once he leaves, he'll never be. Like, he's not, my opinion, Bain's not a first-team goalkeeper for Celtic. No. He could do a job elsewhere, but he's not Celtic class. And he knows it. So he's going to hang around as long as he can. Have a look at a guy like Bitton. Once he leaves, he's never going to get back to a club like at our level. So the problem you're going to have is you either got people who are coming in wanting to, as you said, they're already looking on that next move, and then you've got other guys who are coming in. Because they come in, they know that, like, I don't want to leave, I want the paycheck. So you kind of, that's where you get into that vicious cycle.
I think the buy-in's important, though. It's the vision that whoever's in charge of these transfer dealings, whether it's the manager, director of football, or God forbid, still Peter Lawwell doing it, you know, but it's what is it you're telling them to convince them to sign at that moment? And it should be, you're lucky to be joining us, no matter who it is. And it should be players of an ability that don't have the mindset, like you're saying, of going, oh, I'm just lucky to be here, so I'm going to dig my heels in and stay forever, you know, that haven't got it. You should be getting players that you know are at a good enough level to play, but also balance that with convincing them they're lucky to be at Celtic. And I know it sounds fantasy football stuff saying that, but I don't think what they've done across the city has been rocket science. I really don't.
It's football manager, basically football manager stuff. What you do on that or in FIFA, it's like, I need a defensive midfielder. Okay, who's out there? Okay, for 50,000 quid, we can go up to Dundee and get Glenn Kamara. Okay, let's not go looking in Slovenia, or let's not go looking.
Yeah, for bios of the world.
Yeah, let's look what's in our own backyard. If we need a defensive midfielder now, there's two options in the Scottish League we should have signed or been looking at. One's just signed at Luton Town in Alan Campbell. I thought he would have been perfect as a free signing because Celtic's always had that Scottish core. Or the other one's Lewis Ferguson. They're the two. If you're looking at it going, you got Ali McCann as well at St Johnstone. He's not necessarily a defensive mid, but if you're looking for a midfielder, you've got to look at it and go, what's under our nose in our own league, and then what's out elsewhere. Like
Jarrod, I'll make a great comparison for you, mate. Right, we made the last 16 of the Champions League under Gordon Strachan. Who played centre mid against AC Milan those two matches that we took them to extra time? Paul Hartley and Barry Robson.
Both bought locally.
You know that, and you know, people could talk about, oh, the game's moved on since then. Has it? We were playing against Kaká, Seedorf, and Pirlo, and we took them to extra time over 2 legs. Are you telling me that Europe's elite has better technical players than that now? I disagree. The gulf has always been huge, but it's what you can make up for it, and hunger. And Celtic's underperformance in Europe, by the way, over the last 9 years has bit us in the backside, mate. That's why, I mean, we should have been able to lose this title and fear not, because we had such a war chest of, such a nest egg of money you wouldn't believe. 9 stabs at the Champions League, 3 qualifications. That's very poor in my opinion, and that's what's cost us big time. But in terms of the local resource, and I think it's really important that we do look at the SPFL, and I think Lewis Ferguson for me is just a no-brainer. I think, I know people will scoff at this, but to me, he's box office as well.
Oh, he's what I'm going to say. I agree with you. He's what we need,
and it's box office because of the heritage and the ancestry, and that it would be the signing. It would be of Scott Brown ilk when we signed Scott Brown, because everyone in their grand thought. Firstly, he was diehard Rangers, which was a myth, but secondly, he was already signed at Ibrox. And when we usurped them and paid 4.4 million to Hibs, people were like blown away, going, "How much? Look what you got out of him after."
Yeah, 15 seasons just paid off easy.
Yeah, he paid that off, mate. He paid that off so much, and it changed the pendulum a bit as well. It was like they had to sit back and notice.
It's funny though, because when you look at that, you go 4.4 million. Oh, that's a lot of money to spend. And then you look down south before the crazy TV money came in. I remember when Rio Ferdinand moved for £18 million from West Ham to Leeds. Yes. Everyone's like, oh, that's crazy money. Why would you spend that much on a centre-back? He stayed there for a few years till they had financial problems. Then moved on to Man United for $30 million. And everyone's like, oh, that's ridiculous. $30 million for a centre-back? No way. And then you have a look at him, and he spent 10 years there or 12 years there or whatever at Man United. So you do the averages on it, it's like $2.5 million a year. Like, you'd happily do that. I look at it and go, if you had to pay $5 million or something to bring Ferguson in, and you keep him for 5 years, it's $1 million a year. I'd rather spend that $1 million a year averaged out over him being there for 5 years, for instance, than, which he won't be. If he come to us, he'd be there for 3 years, and then he'd be looking for his next move, like we were just talking about.
So, Jarrod, there's the thing with Ferdinand as well, right? Just quickly to intercept on that, because it's really important, right? See, the thing is as well, how much as you're averaging the fee out, he's also an asset that you can cash in on at any time during that time. So you think, so as much as we were like saying Rio Ferdinand was maybe $2.5 million on average each year when you divide it all up for the amount of years of service, at any point they could have sold him for 50, 60. Yeah, so exactly. You've got assets, mate. So Lewis Ferguson has 2 good years at Celtic, and we get him to sign another 4-year deal. He turns into 10 if he develops the way we hope, of course. That obviously need a bit of, you need to factor that in. But if he does, you're looking at, a 10, 15 million asset as well. So not only do you pay buttons over the years that you've had him, you then obviously generate profit if you do sell him.
And that's something that I've spoken about previously about director of football and everything, where, okay, the perfect example, Dembele come in. We knew he was going to go for big money, but we brought Edouard in underneath him so that when, Dembele leaves, Edouard's ready to step up into that role. It's what they do at clubs like RB Leipzig and Salzburg and all that sort of stuff. Dortmund do the same deal where they have the replacement ready to go. So they'll spend 9-10 million on the star guy, like when, what's his name, Haaland left Salzburg for Dortmund. They went and spent 10 million on the next striker, but then they also went and spent 3 to 4 million on another striker to have underneath it, so that when Haaland's replacement moves, they've got the next guy ready to step up. Ideally, that would be what we're looking at, whether it's a combination of our academy or forward planning. And if you did that, what we're saying with Ferguson, you bring him in for 5 million, you sell him for 15, you've got 10 million there. That's where you invest that 10 million in. Okay, maybe we spend 6 million on his replacement, but we put the other 3 million into his replacement's replacement. You
can't help but feel, Jarrod, that the Edouard signing was the final chapter of Brendan Rodgers having control.
Yep, exactly. Because
It
he was
all
thinking that
changed
way.
after that. And yet, that is, when you look back, the signing that made most sense. Even now, when he's got 1 year left in his deal in a COVID-stricken market, which has reduced values of players, after a rubbish season, which has devalued players as well, we will still double our money on Edouard this summer.
Yeah.
And you look at the goals we got over the time he was there and the memories. It's just, and what are we going to do when we get, say, 15 to 18 million forwards in Edouard this summer? Are we going to do the same again and get another 9-10 million striker and do the same again? My fear is you replace him with someone nowhere near the same ability.
They're probably looking at it going, okay, well, we've already spent $5 million last year on a Yeti. That's his replacement. So now we've got to find that second stringer to be under a Yeti so we'll spend $2-3 million on him. That's probably what they'll do.
We don't speculate to accumulate, Jarrod. It's that simple.
Yep. Basic economics. But, there's so many. People say we're a well-run club, but are we? We're a well-run business. We're not a well-run club in terms of what's happening on the pitch.
Yeah, and I don't think the club has nearly enough in cash reserves as what they should have if they'd capitalised over 9 free hits. 9 free hits in the Champions League.
9 years in a row. That hotel and museum that they've been talking about for years, that would have been done, paid off in cash straight up front. You wouldn't have any out-of-pocket expenses. They'd be updating Barrowfield. That'd be all done already too. So there's a whole bunch of things you could have done there that would have not just fixed the squad, but you put that money in and raises the value of the club's assets in general.
Do you know something, Jarrod? I've exhausted this point, right? But I'm going to say it one more time. We turned over £100 million plus twice.
Yeah.
Both years were the years we had the most expensive manager in our history, and he'd spent plenty of money on the playing staff. And Brendan Rodgers paid for himself in the end in compensation alone. He is still the 6th highest in the world ever compensation packages for a manager. £9 million transfer fee, if you want to call it that, we got for him. On top of that, 2 out of 3 Champions League qualifications, which I think would be what we should be looking to do. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah,
2 out of 3. That's what we should have been targeting. If we'd done 6 out of 9, I would have probably took that. And Rodgers got 2 out of 3, and then funnily enough, the year he didn't make it is the year he wasn't back. But we turned over those years, over 100 million. I'm guessing if we've turned over 100 million, made more profit those years than we ever had. So that was the one time we spent 45 grand a week on a manager, and look at the results. Yep. It's mind-blowing to think you don't continue that trend and that pattern, and you switch to jobs for the boys, Neil Lennon in the showers. Like, it's tragic. And look at the results since. I wonder what we've turned over the last 2 seasons. I don't have it to hand, but I would guess 70 mil, something like that. You're looking at a 30% drop. It's so painfully obvious. Speculate to accumulate.
You got to spend money to make money. That's the old saying in every business. So,
exactly.
Yeah, so I've got a few more comments I could say here, but I'm not going to. But we're talking about Rodgers, right? I was so filthy with the way he left the club, like up in the middle of the night, take all the staff. Yet people are saying, I'm not going to put any more money into the club. I went onto the club's website the other day, the Celtic Superstore, and I found the Rodgers book that was originally like about 40 Australian dollars, right? This thing, $6. So I'm like, why not? I've kind of forgiven. I'm like, I want to have a read. I've got Andrew's book. I've read that, and people say that they're very similar. I'm like, oh, well, for $6, I'll buy his book, whatever.
Before you know it, you've sold your soul to the devil, just like that. I know what you mean, though. I think history's going to look kind on Rodgers. I think his departure, there's going to be a shift in mindset on it. I think we're all beginning to realise there's 2 sides to every story. And you're going to start thinking, why on earth was he itching to get out after just 2.5 years? Why was he so desperate to get out? Like, I don't think he just signed a 4-year deal, remember, a year earlier, 18 months earlier. Why was he so desperate to leave all of a sudden? And you start joining the wee pieces of the puzzle, and you start looking at differently. And I think history's going to end up being kind on Brendan Rodgers,
Same way it was with Ronnie. Like when he left, everyone was like, "Oh, Ronnie, that's terrible." They were putting tarps up in the top deck of the stand, all this sort of stuff. But then you look at Rodgers come in, and that invincible treble squad was pretty much Ronnie's squad with 2 or 3 extra players added.
Totally.
So now you look at what Ronnie did. He was the first step from Lennon's dinosaur tactics and ways to bring it to a more modern style of progressive football and 24-hour athletes and all this sort of stuff. And he left, and then Rodgers took the ball and ran with it even further again. So as you said, why would they and then to go to Lennon, I actually think we've gone back 7-8 years under Lennon in the last 12 months. And I want to know, where are those CVs that were locked in that drawer 2 years ago? Because it took them forever to get a manager this year. If you kept all those CVs locked in a drawer, why didn't you go through them all?
You know something? See, even that comment alone reeks of complacency. Yeah. It reeks of arrogance, and it reeks of unprofessionalism. Now, it may have been a flippant comment, and it might not have been the truth. The fact you're saying that, though, publicly shows a mindset to me that is rotten now to the core. We get told we're entitled as supporters or whatever. It's the board that became entitled first. Yeah. End of story.
Agree with you 100% on that. Like that says it all. And if you were a manager, one of those guys who applied back then or thinking about it, and you heard that comment, would you really want to apply this time around? Probably not, even though it is a big job. So talking about current players, which ones do you think will be moving on in the next 6 months?
There's a lot, mate. I mean, I think there is going to be the clear out of all clear outs, which is the end of an era. For me, I know we spoke about Barkas and he might fit his system. I think his races run, though. I think Barkas will go. I think Sorry?
Bring Matt Ryan in. Happy days.
Yeah. Again, these personal relationships are good, though. Matt Ryan would be like Neil Lennon's Fraser Forster, I think. It was just a go-to guy for him who got him. They got each other. It was a no-brainer, and you only need to look at the impact Forster had in the season 2019-20. He was outstanding. Yeah. So I'd be happy with that. Ayers obviously made it public. I thought he spoke quite well when he did it. It was refreshing honesty for him. Fair enough. Best wishes. For me, ball and goalie shouldn't be given another chance. I just think that was... He dismissed us. He didn't care. He didn't have any regard for what all Neil Lennon's faults. He still deserved respect at the start of last season. He hadn't done anything wrong by then, and he got none from the likes of ball and goalie. Ryan Christie's never going to sign another deal, and he's made that known, I think, for the last 12 months. I think he was one of the players that Neil Lennon referred to after the match against Ferencváros.
Yep.
So he's going to go. I don't think El Yunusi will be back. Scott Brown's departed. Up top, Edward, there's just no way. I think he's going to be important to what our transfer strategy is going forward, that we do recoup money, because, again, you can't see him signing another deal. It's interesting times. Jack Hendry's a funny one. No one seems to know. He seems to be in a halfway hoose, if you like. No one knows if he's signed permanently at Ostend or not yet. No one seems to know the actual. It's never been announced. But then it seemed to be, apparently, had joined them on this agreed end of loan sort of agreed buy option. But then nothing's ever been announced on the Celtic website that he's left. If we have still managed to keep his registration, I would certainly try and keep a hold of him right now. God, we're going to need, we need backup in defence, and the experience he's gained the last year, especially integrating back into the Scotland squad, he could come back a new player. But yeah, just listing those names there, I mean, it's quite daunting, isn't it, when you think about, what's all needing replaced.
Yeah, no, it's insane. And I touched on it earlier, but what do you think of the key areas the team needs to strengthen as a priority?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the goalkeeper straight away, it's the spine of the team, isn't it? We need a goalkeeper. Yeah. We need at least 2 centre-backs. We 100% need a right-back, I think, might now, after... Just to show that we are downsizing and to prove, I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen O'Donnell comes in at right back as the experienced one and they try and develop O'Connell. I know, mate, I'm not saying I'm advocating that, by the way. But watch this space. That's my prediction. That is my prediction.
This Stephen pish again. Yeah, I used the Scottish word pish.
I think Sorrow is an interesting one. I think they may well still go for an experienced midfielder. I think the Scott Brown void's so big that they need to be seen to be doing something to replace that void. If they were to be ambitious enough to try and approach getting Victor Wanyama in at 30 years old, I would be all for that. I think he would come at a handsome price, but again, I think he would get the last 5 years of his career. I think he could be influential, and I think he would join in a heartbeat. And then again, you've got the Griffiths-Ayeti conundrum where, again, Jarrod, none of us are sure if these guys have a future at the club or not. So therefore, and Bio, I think they can. I just don't see that happening. I think again we're going to need a striker. And left midfield as well.
Yep.
And we are looking at a big rebuild here, Jarrod. When you look at the names I've suggested leaving, and then that was 7 to 8 positions I think I've just listed off there. It's daunting.
And some of them we need coupling. The thing for me, right, is I'm going to say, when you touched on Sorrow before saying that we need help with him, I rate Sorrow. I see him as a lot of people are saying, he could be our N'Golo Kante. For me, he reminds me a lot of Claude Makelele.
Mm-hmm.
Size, the way he moves, he looks like he's 2 steps ahead of the play, which is great. But what my concern is I actually thought we were too undersized and we were very small in our midfield.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to get we need to get a bit more size, especially up the middle of the field. You look at Martin O'Neill's teams.
I just described him, mate.
Yeah.
I told you the guy.
Yeah.
Go to the MLS and ask them what they want for Wanyama.
Yeah. We need size, and it's not just in that position. If we're going to bring him in, great. But Stephen O'Donnell, he's not that tall. Like, look at Lustig. Look at his size. He was, even as right back, he had size about him where if, say, Tierney was forward, Lustig could stay back as like 3 at the back. And
O'Donnell is, mate. You'd be surprised. I think he's 6'2" or something.
Really?
Honestly. Yeah.
Certain players, like I was talking to Jim on another one of these Tim Talks, and he was saying Roberto Casais, who's over in Belgium at the moment, who is a New Zealander. And where I sit for my local team over here and watch them, I always thought he was like 5'7", maybe 5'8", and he was small. And he's like 6'2", 6'3", and he's a big guy. And I'm like,
wow.
Okay, cool. He's a bit bigger than Gary Hooper. He was a couple inches taller than him. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm like, there's players that you just look at and you just think they're small because of the way they play. But maybe that's why I think that about O'Donnell.
Yeah, O'Donnell's someone that Clark often used to like come in as he's sort of, as you're saying, if they're pushing up on the left, he would tuck in as a right sort of centre back. O'Donnell. I think that is going to be something that'll end up like a Gordon Strachan. Remember he's saying Paul Telfer, and we're all going, but Paul Telfer, we knew was never going to be an excellent player, but he's steady. He'll take you over for the integration year, which I think there is a transitional year ahead. I think he might just be, especially, from what I hear, O'Connor's meant to be decent, mate. He's already a full Ireland international.
Yeah.
So I'm quite comfortable with someone coming back on a high from the Euros, 29 years old, affordable, knows the league inside out, to be a steady Eddie, and then, hopefully getting a lot more first-team chances for yet another one of these project players that we never really see the light of day enough of, Jarrod,
Be what Johnny Hayes was supposed to be for Mikey Johnson. There you go.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant way of putting it.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So, switching gears then. Russell, I want to know, who would be your all-time favourite Celtic player and why?
So I think this question should be changed for people of my generation. I think it should be, apart from Henrik Larsson, who's your favourite Celtic player of your generation? Why? Because Henrik, to me, is too obvious, and I think you'd get too many people ranting and raving about him. So I had a good think about this. But it's the same era, and it was his partner, Chris Sutton. Chris Sutton, to me, was the guy that took Larsson to the next level. As much as, obviously, Martin O'Neill was influential, but Sutton was a huge cog in that Henrik Larsson machine that we then seen his first season playing with him. Larsson, it's no fluke, scored 53 goals. The next season, I think Henrik scored 42, 43. Here's my theory. England take Emil Heskey to be the foil for Mike Owen at the 2002 World Cup. Henrik Larsson just scored basically nearly 100 goals in 2 seasons playing with Chris Sutton. Swap Heskey for Chris Sutton at the 2002 World Cup. England have a completely different chance in that tournament. I think he was an underrated, intelligent player as well. He knew where Henrik's runs were because you only need to look at what his record was like playing Alan Shearer as well.
That's what I was about.
Foil for Shearer. Yep.
I can go back for two different paths. You had Shearer and Sutton together, amazing together, right? Sutton was at Chelsea before we got him. One of my best mates growing up, massive Chelsea fan. Before Abramovich was there, they went over. He bought himself brand new Chelsea top auto glass sponsor, the circle logo with all the old stuff. He got himself that. Sutton 9 on the back. He got me, because I'd go around to his house all the time watch it. He got me one of the fake ones over there. So if you're going to come to my game and watch them, at least wear that, right? Oh no, I felt dirty. But then he got me the same fake Celtic version shirt, right? By the time they got back, they were leaving England. The transfer hadn't happened. By the time he landed here, suddenly Sutton, no longer a Chelsea player, he'd signed at Celtic.
Amazing.
So he's got this Chelsea shirt with Sutton 9 on the back, and now Sutton's with us. So, the first time I watch a game afterwards, I just went over in my Celtic shirt going, I thought you'd want to see this because of Sutton. Warmed him up proper. Yeah, but no, he's a quality player. But yeah, his brain, the way he thought the game was probably his best weapon. A lot of people you think, it was his great shot here or his Michael Owen, it was his speed early on. That the difference? It wasn't that he was a great finisher, he had all these other things, but his speed was his biggest thing.
Yep.
The biggest thing that Sutton had from day one that gave him the career longevity that he had was what was going on in his head.
Yep. He knew the runs. He didn't need to look where Henrik was. He knew where he would be because he thinks he's on the wavelength I am. I mean, you look at some of Lars's goals, and it's actually quite good technique, flicks and stuff from Sutton as well. And just to touch on the football brain, Martin O'Neill had no hesitation dropping him into centre-half for huge games.
Yeah.
Dropping him to play centre-back because he can read what's happening. And then towards the final season under O'Neill, how many games did Sutton play centre-mid? Not even a box-to-box. And just because he could read the game. I thought he was a wonderful player for us. And what I also loved as well, too hard. I mean, hard as a coffin nail. Absolutely. I mean, the way that chip will always, it was 0-0 and it was it was the whitewash, green and whitewash, when we completed, beating them every single game that season. 90th minute, he throws Frank de Boer at the road, with a fair shoulder charge, but Frank de Boer is like, he's in the Clyde, you know what I mean? He's sent him flying. And then the presence of mind from an aggressive moment to dink a world-class keeper in Stefan Klos from 30 yards. Wow. Yeah. It was top draw. Yeah, I loved watching Sutton play for us. And he gave us a hope in Europe as well because he liked to mix it with the big boys, There
was one thing you didn't mention about Sutton that I'm going to bring up.
Yeah. His
link-up play, not just with Henrik, but also with Hartson. That right there, I'm going to say it. Mark Viduka, thank you for going to Leeds to give us the money to bring those guys in. Yep. That's his ongoing legacy in terms of what he did at Celtic, in my opinion. But yeah, it was just like the way him and Hartson linked up was great as well. And Hartson played with some quality strikers before he came to Celtic. But yeah, that was probably his most prolific. And if we had the three of them all fit in Seville, Jose Mourinho would be a nobody.
I get what you're saying. I think you're absolutely right as well. When you looked at Sutton and Hartson together, it was so unlikely it would work because you just been two huge giant strikers. But it did because of Hartson was predictable in the way he played, and I don't mean that in a bad way because he was a better finisher than Sutton. To be fair to Big Bad John, he was some finisher, but he was quite predictable in how his style of football, how he would expect him to play. Where Sutton had a lot more to his game. His movement off the ball like you said, his reading of the game, the layoffs, the flicks, just class, man. And he was someone that just got it from the moment he came in. And yeah, I would say out with Henrik, and it is Henrik, right, is the answer to your question.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I thought it'd be more fun to talk about someone else, and it would be him second in line.
that's good. Yeah, so one thing with Sutton as well is you said Hartson was more, you knew what he was going to do. You knew what Henrik was going to do. The glue that linked that up and made it all work was Sutton because he could adjust his game depending on who he was playing with. So, yeah, good player. His punditry is nowhere near as good. But I do love him on Twitter. He's an absolute menace on there.
He is.
All right. So now for the next one then. Who would be your top 5 players that you've seen play for Celtic in your lifetime?
Difficult, mate, isn't it? So
I love these questions.
I tried to work it out chronologically. So I thought I'll start from when I started watching football and I'll work my way through the years. Do you know what I mean? So I've went for 2 from the 90s, and that is Paul McStay. Again, we were talking at the start about my dad's, importance in me loving football. This guy was the guy that Dad was basically saying, that is Celtic. You understand? That guy is world class. He turned down them all to stay with us. And one of my first memories of him was missing the penalty against Wraith Rovers in the 94 Cup final, and the League Cup final, and it broke my dad's heart that it was him that missed it because of everything he gave to the club. Paul McStay is someone that I just think is a go-to guy. Like, he is an inspiration. He should always be someone that you look to as an example of what it means to play for the club. When you're looking to see if your dreams can be fulfilled at Celtic, look no further than a Paul McStay. Just so influential in my early football life, it'd be remiss to miss him. And then I'm going John Collins, because John Collins knew he was good. John Collins was too good for that Celtic team at that time. In fact, it's crazy to think Collins and McStay, if they had players even remotely close to their level around them. That was the thing, the disparity between McStay and Collins in midfield, and then perhaps the other positions of the pitch at that time, was so out of touch. It was mad. It's actually tragic in a way as well. You look at those two in as midfield and you go, wow, that is world-class midfield.
But that's what's happening behind them.
Yeah, it's what was around them. It was just, and I always look back, because obviously it's topical right now because Scotland are at a major tournament again for the first time since '98. There's no one I would rather have took that penalty against Brazil than John Collins. Why? Because he knew he would score. Scottish players just don't have that confidence about them, And he went to them Monaco, played with Trezeguet, a young Trezeguet, a young Thierry Henry, the likes of Fabien Barthez in goal. There's another one, but I can't remember his name.
Was that under Wenger before he went to Japan?
I'm not trying to think. There's another one. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, Collins was in a team, that Monaco team. I think they made the semis of the Champions League. They tore Man United apart at Old Trafford with Collins in midfield. He was top draw. And always remember his belter, a free kick at Ibrox as well, left Andy Gorham absolutely perplexed. He was top, man. He was influential because I was left-footed when I played football as well. He was just one of those folk you kind of looked up to, do you know what I mean? Moving on, Henrik Larsson has to be mentioned now because he is the king of kings. He is the greatest player I've ever seen in the flesh. His movement off the ball, his reading of the game, his technique, his touch. And then what's always underrated about Henrik was his heading ability. What a header of a football Henrik Larsson was for 5'9", 5'10". His spring, he had that ability like Klinsmann had. He could hang in the air. So he jumps, and for whatever mad physics, he could stay in the air an extra second. It was mad.
I've never seen one player do that since then, and that would be, say, Tim Cahill. Would be the only since then. A short guy who hang in the air. Great shout.
The amount of headed goals he scored for Everton, I'm sure Australia as well, frightening. But obviously Henrik's up there, and then you're looking at, it was tough because Lubo has to be in it because he could do things with both feet. I was talking about him on Scream of Celtic Cup the other week. I remember we played Rosenborg away, He comes on as a sub, right? So the board goes up. We've got a free kick. That's how there was a break in play. He runs on the pitch, doesn't break stride, and hits the free kick from running on. Runs across the pitch, doesn't break stride. So he's not positioned the ball or nothing. He just runs 30 yards, whips across into the box. I thought that just be moments like that when he trapped the ball on his backside. And then, of course, a lot of important goals, memorable goals. The one at Easter Road, the thunderbolt he hit. Everyone associates him with like curlers and beautiful technique. He just rifled one at Easter Road one day. It was literally, that's what nets are there for. Because if that net wasn't there, that's taking someone out, Absolute thunderbolt. And either foot, nonplussed. Who else?
And who would be
number 5?
Number 5.
So it might sound obvious, but I'm going Virgil van Dijk. I don't think we realised, and we knew he was top, but I don't think we realised how good a player we had then. It's funny because his partner at the time was now the Lyon captain, Jason Denayer, and yet we were conceding loads of goals. I think I remember in one European campaign, we got beat 6-0 at the Nou Camp or something with Van Dijk and Denayer as your centre-backs, which is kind of beggars belief. The Lyon captain, the Holland captain, nowadays. But I thought Van Dijk was just a giant. I mean, a player. He was a high school player playing in the primary school playground at times,
That one against Kilmarnock, I think it was. That was just insane.
St Johnstone, I think it was.
Johnstone, that's the one, yeah.
St Johnstone, he just runs the pitch, couple of 1-2s, just passes it in the net. Mate, he was the best free kick taker at Celtic at that point as well. He had it all, and he's one of those players you just look at with total pride when you watch him, doing what he's doing now. And if it had to be another place, it'd be Kieran Tierney. I think everyone seems to think he's improved dramatically since he went to Arsenal. Nonsense.
Oh, really?
He's been that good the whole time.
Yeah. It's one of them things. He's just doing – it's like what I said about Eddie Howe coming in compared to Ange. Do you want someone who's more famous, or do you want someone who has got better credentials? Tierney was doing what he's doing, the same thing, that had the same credentials that he's doing at Arsenal he's doing for us. He's doing the same thing there. But now he's doing it in a league with bigger presence on TV. People suddenly think he's improved and he's better. No, I don't really see much improvement other than that he's not playing against the teams like St Johnstone and Ross County and them every weekend, so he's got a tougher games more regularly.
He could have raised it at any point during his Celtic career to be playing against those elite teams every time.
You could see him
every time back then.
See him against Man City in the Champions League. You see him against Barcelona, your PSGs in the Champions League. He had guys like Neymar running at him, and he's like, Messi, and nothing to worry about. He held his own every time. I think he's a great player, and his next move is his key. If he leaves, not only because it's going to earn us a nice, pretty packet, but also he leaves Arsenal, he's going right to the top. He wouldn't look out of place. Marcelo is leaving Real Madrid. There's a spot right there for him on the left wing. Off you go, son. He'll do the job. And he'll sit in and people like, why you got this Scottish guy here? He's sunburned all the time. And then next thing you know, Tierney will come back looking all tan like some sort of Adonis, and he's just like big pay packet and he's dominating life. And everyone's like, oh, look, he's the best left back in the world. And we're like, we knew that 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely right. My hunch is he's going to end up at City, because I just think Pep Guardiola will just recognise all the traits he's got and not accept. And he seems to have a blank cheque for signing defenders. So I think you're looking at Kieran Tierney being let's be honest, I think he's 60 million upwards.
Yeah. I think if, let's look at it this way, if that Walker or whatever went for 49 million or whatever it was to Man City, then you got to chuck at least another 20 on top of that.
Yeah. Yep. And he's that good. He's that good. So, yeah, he was the tough one to leave out. So we're going with the top 6, mate.
Cool. Happy with that. You got one on the bench then. Perfect. Let's have Lubo come straight off the bench, banging goals. Perfect.
Yes.
All right. So, what are some of the most memorable games that you've seen Celtic play, and what is so memorable to you about those games?
So, I'm going to go with the most memorable, my favourite, still probably is my favourite Celtic game, Ewood Park and the road to Seville. for various reasons. The men against boys thing is very obvious. But my favourite reason about that game was Brad Friedel had just won man of the match at Highbury 4 days before and was getting raved on match day as the best goalie in the league. I think it was something like a Premier League record of shots on target he'd saved.
Yeah.
But in coinciding with those 4 or 5 day spell, the English media had also been questioning whether Henrik Larsson could do it on a rainy night in Stoke, whatever you want to call it. Because even though he'd scored the winner against Blackburn, he did a quiet game. Is he really world class? That was the question on all their lips. He got 19 minutes into the match or whatever it was. He sees the whites of Friedel's eyes. 2 players have slipped. He takes a heavy first touch. What does he do? Outside of the boot, the dink over Friedel's head, the arrogance, the pissed offness that Henrik Larsson felt. You could see it in him. Who are you to question me? I don't need to be doing it in the Premier League every week to know how good I am. Still at World Cups, European Championships. By the way, I scored the winner in that last game that you're calling me a donkey from, in case you'd forgotten. Men against boys doesn't like that. And then the beauty of that game was after it, Ray Stubbs interviews him, and Henrik Larsson swears on the BBC. Now, this guy doesn't lose his cool. Henrik was very controlled. He says, the first game we played shit tonight, I think we showed them what we can do. And it always tells you, don't say too much until the tie is done. And I just thought, he has got both barrels out for you guys. You could tell. He wasn't looking him in the eye. It was like, how dare all yous firstly question me, secondly question this team, and when we beat yous 1-0 last week, by the way. And obviously there was the Graham Souness factor, which added even further salts in the wounds. There was the fact Sutton scored at Ewood Park again. I just thought that game had all the ingredients, and it was a fantastic Blackburn team. York and Cole up front, they were only 31. They're the same age as Henrik, funnily enough, both of them. They had the likes of 2 guy in midfield. David Thompson at that time was a wonderful player for them. I know that sounds like I'm scraping the barrel, but he genuinely was top drawer at that time for them. It was a great. Brett Emerton was there, I'm sure.
Is that when they had David Bentley as well?
Damien Duff. No, it was Damien Duff. They had David Dunn. It was a top team, mate.
Yeah,
top team.
Lucas Neal in their back line as well.
Yes.
They had Brett Emerton and Lucas Neal, those 2 Aussies in that team as well.
Yeah, and then in goals, as I say, Brad Friedel, who was such hot property at the time. And yeah, it was just, that was the time we arrived. I think that win was the springboard for everything else we achieved on the road to Seville. The other game I'll just quickly mention, I don't want to drag this on too long, the other game I'd mention would be the Brunei, how the Brunei originated. As much as we didn't win, the 2-2 draw at Rangers, 10 men the whole of the second half, and we passed them off the park that day. And Brunei scores a left foot curler, which is unheard of. But we passed them at shreds that day with 10 men. They couldn't deal with us. We got better with 10 men that day. And that was special.
Nice. Now, last question for you. Other than Messi and Ronaldo, who would be the one player that you have seen play and wish that they had signed for Celtic?
So has this been in the flesh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the flesh. Honestly, this is going to be controversial. I did a lot of thinking. Harry Ferguson. I know, mate. I know.
No,
I think I admired him as a footballer.
He was a prick. That's why he would loved it.
Yeah. He falls in my category of prickness as well. But mate, he could read the game so well. He was his range of passing. He's for the cause. I would have took. Yeah, he was. If you're talking about in the flesh, I wasn't privileged enough to be going to loads of Champions League games when I was young and stuff. But I remember watching him play for Rangers against Celtic at Celtic Park, and he was outstanding. Just a proper footballer. I know it's controversial to say that, but if you just take the glasses off, and just go player for player, how good was he? What level was he at? Would he have got in our team? I think he would have been challenged. I think yeah. And I actually admire him as a pundit. I don't know if you've heard much from him on. He talks so fondly of Celtic players and how much respect he's got for. He was talking to Paul McStay on the phone last week. It was on the radio show, and he just gussed him. So Go Radio, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Paul McStay was on the line, and he just said, "Paul, I've got to tell you, I didn't like the team you played for, but even then I knew how great, how special a footballer you were. And I just think, if he can do it, so can I. And that kind of think it's because he did that with Paul McStay the other week that made me find it more palatable to say that. And I know it's controversial because he's a Rangers player, he was a Rangers legend or whatever, but would I have taken him in a Celtic shirt had he not had the Rangers past? That would have took him even regardless. If we'd bought him back, if it'd been Celtic he joined from Blackburn, would you have done it? I would have.
What about someone then you didn't see live that you've only seen on TV?
Zlatan.
Yeah.
Easy. Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I've read his book, man. It's phenomenal. If anyone's not read his book, I Am Zlatan. It is amazing. It's a phenomenal read.
It's a nightmare to read because it's like you could tell that he wrote, like I've got the first version, so he wrote it in Swedish and then it was just straight converted.
Yeah.
So it's the most boring thing to read ever, but I love it.
Yeah. It's blunt, isn't it?
Yeah. For me, I'd say Raquelme.
Yeah, love that. Love that. It's a great show.
Imagine him in the hoops.
Oh, mate. Yeah. No, I love it. It was a great show.
Yeah,
great show.
So what we'll do then, Russell, is thanks for jumping on and having a chat.
Sorry, it's been on so long, Jarrod, mate. I can't shut up once I get going, mate.
As I said, it's like we've known each other forever, so it's
I know.
It's brilliant. But do you want to just tell everyone where they can find you on Axom? Like you've got your normal weekly one and then your others, so just give them a bit of a plug.
Yeah, man, why not? But yeah, so I'm on the Monday Bulletin on Celtic State of Mind at 12:30 every Monday, talking nonsense about, there's always something to talk about with Celtic, especially the past 12 months. And then on a Tuesday evening at 6:30, we do a show on A State of Mind. It's the channel on YouTube. And we do a show called Scream a Celica, where we pick a Celtic game from the past. Like I was discussing Ewood Park there, for example. We would talk about that for 45 minutes. And then we talk about music at that era, and we pick an album out from the charts that was around at that time. We'll discuss the band in depth, or each band in depth, each album in depth, as well as obviously having a great look into who that Celtic squad was at the time, where the squad was mentally, who was in form at the time, who scored the goals in that match, and the amount of names that crop up, that you forget about and stuff, the amount of cult heroes. It's a fantastic journey back into the past. We call it a trip on the DeLorean. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, check it out.
Thanks again, Russell.
Thank you, Jarrod, mate.